We have only 35 chambers. There is no 36.
I know that. But I want to create a new chamber.
And what would that be?
I think Shaolin techniques should be available to all. So then, that's my idea for a new chamber. To teach the martial arts to the people. Anybody.
All right, welcome back to another episode of My 3 Cents. So this episode is going to be my 3 cents on the Kanye situation, different stuff he's been saying, how it's being dealt with publicly, different people's opinion. I'm not really going to repeat anybody's opinion too much. I'm going to try not to anyway. But this is going to be more of an educational episode where, because I've said some things in the past that can also be misconstrued and looked at as anti-Semitic. And I like to say, like, whenever I'm speaking on different cultures, you might notice that I pause in between sometime and say, hey, I don't belong to any groups. This isn't this isn't that. Because I like to be very clear about where I'm coming from and my perspective. Okay. So remember, this is my 3 cents. You come here to hear a different take, a different perspective, and get some metaphysical ancestry knowledge that's going to always be real time to the situation. All right. So with this, I want to start off by saying that as I've been observing Kanye over the last few years, with him being in the news and whatnot, I feel like, well, I've always felt like what's happening is that he's going through the genetic awakening. Okay. Now, what happens in this, especially if you're a celeb or a celebrity, you are in the public eye during this transformation. So to the naked eye, this could look very quote unquote crazy. It can look like you're disoriented in your thoughts and you're not consistent with your patterns of how you're acting. Like, this can look all kind of ways. Remember, because you're going from the outside looking in. This is not your experience that you're judging. Okay, remember that. So I've always felt like this man is going through his genetic awakening publicly. So this is tough, especially for a person like me who's able to see the levels. And to see people stuck in certain levels, man, that's hard to watch, right? For me, that's hard to watch because I see it all the time. A lot of my good friends are also stuck at these levels. And I will say, I say stuck for lack of a better term because this is always an ongoing thing, right? This is always an ongoing evolution of thought and understanding and turning under into inner into over. This is an alchemical process of knowledge and information, right? Of what starts as information, okay? So I get that this is a whole process. So it's easy for me to recognize where somebody's at, right? And, there is a place where you'll start leaning into religious history. I like to just call it religious history, okay? We'll combine two things, religion and actual factual history of the world. Okay, evolution of people, civilizations, right, in that context. So when you combine these two things, this is your mind really trying to make sense of the indoctrination, the parts of the indoctrinations that were the strongest in religion, right, versus what you feel genetically as a being, right, in a human form. So when these ideologies start to combine, a lot of times a person will pop out as, let's just say, for example, right, if you're melanated, they will pop out normally as a Hebrew Israelite, okay? Because this is the knowledge that they are still figuring this thing out. So it's no shame, shade, judgment. But what I'm trying to tell you is, if you haven't been beyond that, of course, that's going to be where you're at. Right? This is knowledge. You have to know the ledge. This is knowing the edge of what you know and being comfortable saying, look, I don't know much beyond this. So this is my extent. So there's no shame or judgment in that, right? It makes total sense to be where you are. So it's hard to observe when you see people spend a little too much time in the same place. And though that was the right place to be when you got there, follow me, right? It wasn't where you should stay and build from. That is not what you should be doing. You should be understanding how that correlates and relates in this evolutionary thing. Because remember, you arrived at this point. Were you not moving before you got there? Why stop? You see what I'm saying? So even if you think, well, I am going forward because I'm going deeper into what I have learned. And see, that's another trick, because you can be going deeper into a different indoctrination. See, if you're not able to zoom out and see only nature in correlation with what you're dealing with, if you can't see a very clear nature reflection of the exact situation and circumstance in which you are dealing with, if you cannot look around and find that on earth, you are not in a place that is sustainable. You got to understand that. So you can end up going down a spiral or a rabbit hole of your own making, right? And this all started with good intent. Nobody entered into dishonor this whole time. So this is a tough thing to understand. And so for me, I often see brothers go that route, lean on that. And I get it, because we're trying to find ourselves. But you gotta go further than that. You gotta understand to look up. You gotta understand that there's something that's above what you're on. There's a zoom out. So first, what I want to say is we got to recognize that we belong to what I like to call a careful what you say, kind of a careful what you say society. And we can't deny that we belong to a very now sensitive, careful what you say society. So when Kanye's saying things like, and I want to be careful what I say, right? When he's saying things like certain groups run certain enterprises, you might say, well, that's not so bad. But when you understand the definition of the terms being used as slanderous terms upon people, right? Saying that they're anti this and anti that. So now when you investigate those terms, you will understand that even to speak against them in a way that you might find not really offensive, but because it has been done that way for so long in the past, right? Throughout ages, it is not tolerated. So that is why it is so, they're so firm in that stance, right? Where they'll drop the axe. So we don't stop to ask ourselves, what group or why, let's say why is all other groups working very hard to protect one group? I'm going to stop there, right? So I'm just going to say that, and I'm going to let you think about that. Why does every group work very hard to protect one group? Maybe one group has a lot at stake because of how things have been positioned. That's all I'm saying. Now let's keep going. Now, when I talk about him going through his genetic awakening, what I mean about awakening is that genetically we understand that this is when your dormant DNA becomes active, right? You have done a certain level of understanding in life, connecting of neural networks and things that you have put back together that were waiting to be put back together, that have catapulted you to another level, right? You kept pushing yourself beyond your knowledge. Now, when this, what they call junk DNA, becomes active, this is what I refer to as the beginning of the genetic awakening, right? Where your whole perception changes, therefore your whole life changes. Okay? So during this, what you got to realize first is that in an awakening happens from the outside in. It doesn't happen from the inside out, right? Why do I say it happens from the outside in? Because it is something that, to me, has to deal with a series of, let's say, deprogramming levels, right? Let's think of it that way because it's an easy way to see it. So from the outside in, we're going to stretch all the way out to where, let's say, to where they told you who you were, right? To where you have accepted your name as you. I mean, you're out there. So we're going to stretch all the way out. And we're going to start deprogramming from the outermost layer things that we have been programmed and learned, right? Indoctrinated. And this is not to refute the information and what a lot of it became knowledge. No, this is not to disrespect it. This is not to be dishonorable about it. But it is to take an honest look and just see what we have become and not be scared to reach out and take some of that shit off. So you can actually see yourself for a change, right? This is a part of the awakening. The egotistical 5 layers of ego clothing that you wear, right? Masks included, will all be stripped off. This is a part of the process, right? So from the outside in, this is like losing weight. You're doing all that work that's generating that energy on the inside to give you those effects on the outside to get you down to a place where the inside and outside can actually communicate with not much in between. You get what I'm saying? It's a more healthy connection to parts of your body and the creatures in you that are so minuscule and small to your mind that you might not even care about. But that's what's causing your suffering. You see? It has to do with a series of deprogramming from the outside inward, right? And this shows the levels. This shows the levels of indoctrination when you see people struggle with change. So this is a tough process when people start going through this. This is a very tough process because everything you've been told starts to kind of feel like lies, because they weren't necessarily lies, but a lot of them were half truths, because the people that gave it to you, they were just told this stuff too. They didn't really know nothing either. Okay, so once you can get through some of that, you can discover who you are again, right? So we got to break that down and just say discover, right? Uncover, re-uncover, discover. It has been covered. Who you are has been covered. Discover who you are, right? So this is when they get into the I am knowledge, right? I am, I think, therefore I am. So just ponder on that yourself when you meditate next time. I am, right? Be very careful of what you think and put after that, because that's the powerful thing right there, is to accept an acknowledgement of self. It is an acceptance and an acknowledgement of self to the highest degree. We outside the bullshit on this one. We're not in a place of debate with this one, right? So we talk about awakening the bloodlines, deprogramming the levels. You know, this is something that's been in your path, right? This has been on your journey, because this was a level you were supposed to get to. Him, you, everybody. This is gonna happen. This is gonna happen. Everybody has their time where they start to realize. You think realize, you think all this stuff is coincidence? Because there's an unseen code just laying under everything that you're dealing with on the surface. Because you've become so distracted and dismayed by the surface events, the surface energy, all the feelings on the surface. It can tow you up. Surface level stuff. If you let that take you down, it's a long road to get back. You're just building more layers to cut through later. But you can't ignore them, because they're gonna be there. Even my daughter understands shadow work, and she even understands now that some things that she's doing right now, you know, or let's just say some things in her life are gonna be her shadow work. She knows that, and guess what? She understands that it's not about her. It's about other people that's in her life, that because their life is the way it is, and because we're connected, another person can give you shadow work. What does that mean? That you're going to have to deal with that person later in life in a new light and in a different way, to where some enlightenment is going to happen. It's going to be a powerful exchange. It's building. We know that. She can recognize that. So this is what I'm talking about with understanding, solving these issues within, and then what I'm talking about is awakening the bloodline through this event with the genetics, right? So there's a lot of levels of deprogramming needed. Your starting point is going to be the hardest point to get through. It's just like working out or anything like that. You can often compare things that are actual truth to other things. This is like algebra when you're solving for X or Y or something like that. This is no different. So you can solve this a different way in life. You can solve things a different way and still get an answer. This is allegory, algorithmic. So once you start to get through to the inside, right, from the outside off the surface, you start to mutate the inside, which starts to mutate the outside. So it starts to become its own cycle of energy that works for itself. Now, again, how to make this make sense? Just talk about it in working out. Once you start working out, say you're a bigger person, say you're trying to get somewhere, right? You got an ideal body shape for yourself, and it's not always about weight. It's about sometimes it's just about shape, proportion, and how you like things to sit and be when you operate, how you move around. Is it comfortable? Is it uncomfortable, right? So let's say you got goals for yourself. Now you in there working out, you're not going to see results right away. It's designed that way because it's only about who really wants something. If you got to see it instantly, then you won't ever have something. You'll always be waiting on that next person trying to sell you a dream of how easy it is. You'll be that type of person, right? The other type of person knows not to look for results and just keep putting the work in, because results come as a byproduct. Results can't not show up. You see, that's a double negative. Results have to show up, right? It's just funny that when you see people going through these things in public, talking their truths in their moments and getting judged for them, it's hard for them to move on to their next truth in the process, because now it looks like they're backtracking, apologizing, and it's really just a series of unfolding of the mind during a series of deprogramming from the outside. And it's happening simultaneously, man. So it's best not to really do too much speaking up in public during that time, right? Until you really understand what you're involved in. And if you're a celebrity, they've always been looking at you, comparing your life. So I feel like he has a disadvantage of going through his awakening in the public eye with most people that will not go through the awakening in their lifetime and will recycle. So when you're talking about something like mass brainwashing, or let's just say, how the masses think, because they're all right calling you chattel, saying things like herd immunity. But when you say that there's a system in place that's getting everyone to move a certain way, now you're not allowed to say that. So this is something that we got to understand, that if we won't accept what's being said, then somebody please explain to me why we got to talk so careful. So another thing is that they're saying that he is giving people the license, and they're using the term license. They're saying that he's giving people the license to do things against Jew people. And I feel like that's unfair as well. And the only reason they're saying that is because he's a celebrity and he's in the spotlight. So they're telling you that with the spotlight comes a certain level of responsibility. They don't care how you as a person might feel, because this is more of a what the masses are going to do type of deal when it comes to celebrities. And, I feel like it's further proving his point that there is a control narrative. And I'm not saying who's doing it, so don't even try it, right? But what I'm saying is that there has to be a reason. There has to be a reason that everybody has to move a certain way. If we're all saying that it's not true, then who's saying that it's true? That's weighing up against all of us. That's all I'm asking, right? So I don't believe one person can be the face for the black community or any community whatsoever. I feel like if you got people out doing stuff and saying it's because of him, you know what? They could be implants, and they could also be people that are just stupid because they want to do it. And some people are just like that. So don't come back to me saying what somebody did because of something I said when I don't even know that person. Think about how odd it would be if somebody did that to you. If somebody in the store overheard your conversation, went off in their life and did some stuff, and then reported you and said, hey, it was somebody in the store, I got it from them. You say, I don't even know them. Why were they listening to my conversation? So when you're a celebrity, there's no chance you're not able to say, why were they listening to my conversation? You don't get to say that part, right? So that means that people can say you influenced them, and you cannot refute that because you are influenced, because you have been put in an influential light. They have done this on purpose, right? Who is they? I'm just saying they is Hollywood or whoever likes to boost people above other people to sell things and make money, because at the end of the day, I don't see regular people on my commercials. I see people I've seen before on other things, and on other things. So there's a certain recognition and there's a certain knowledge going on that's really meant to affect the brain and kind of keep you from making certain decisions by making it very easy to make other decisions, okay? So I'm really explaining this thing in code, but I know that you guys get exactly what I'm saying. So let's keep on, because I got some really good stuff to get to that's going to really educate you, because I'm just going to read it, right? And this is some of the stuff I read. I'm going to show you the level of the knowledge that I really sit and ponder, and show you how things ain't always what they cracked up to be. Let's keep going. So we talked about transforming from the inside out, right? Getting to the surface, how one person can't be the voice for the community or be blamed for that. They have closed his schools down. So I just want to name a few of the things that's going on with the situation. His Donda Academy schools have been closed down, where his main goal was to try to educate people in a different light. I know it kind of veered into sports and athletics, because that is the nature of our community's influence. Majoritively, sports, rap, the same old stuff, right? So we kind of expect that, especially when you're dealing with a musician / rapper / creator, artist. So this is what it is until it's something else. But it is an honest effort. It is a very honest effort at something that I haven't seen other people do, that I know have had the money to do that before in our community. I never seen Michael Jordan build a school or even attempt nothing that big. I'm just saying, and I'm not slight. I love Michael Jordan, but I'm just saying, right? So they shut that down. So I also saw something that was real interesting, and it was that people were burning the shoes, right? People were taking the Yeezys and burning them. Now, sneakerheads and people like that, they pay a whole lot of money for these shoes. What I don't understand about this is that these shoes still belong to the brand, and the brand is still the brand. So this whole movement really doesn't make sense. It's kind of weird to me that you're burning something that's worth real US currency when you got poor people out there, and then you'll say, well, they burning them, but then they're donating 3 and 4 times the value of the shoes to the community with lesser value shoes, a whole bunch of pairs. And it's like, yeah, I get that, but did you have to try to say you was doing it in the name of entering into dishonor against another human, to say that you was gonna go and do something great and be recognized for helping people in that light? I mean, what was your motivation, right? These blood shoes. I don't want your blood money, right? And that's that knowledge of where did you, what was your motivation behind this before I accept it type of energy, right? So just think about that. You got people doing a lot of weird stuff right now and saying this on behalf of, and he literally said it in quotation, on behalf of Kanye West. He's burning his shoes. So I'm like, this almost seems like you're paying homage to him, that your dumbass paid full price for his shoes and then burnt them. It's like, yo, he still got the money. So I don't know if you're really thinking about how this works, if it's just symbolic and you're willing to take the L. I don't know. But it's just another example of how people are so eager to try to virtue signal. They don't know what to do. And it's like, what do I do? What do I do online? Oh, I know. Let's burn the stuff, right? That I liked enough to buy and spend my money on. Okay, so that's just ignorant all the way around. Okay, they're shoes at the end of the day. This ain't about shoes. This is about a bigger issue, a lot of bigger issues. This is not about merchandise. This is not about deals. This ain't about none of that. So now that we're talking about these deals, right? Besides talking about these burning the shoe fake stunts, now we're talking about these deals. And, a lot of companies then cut ties with them. And so what you saw was a cascading of the companies kind of like one after the other cutting ties, right? Okay, they also compared them to Hitler. and they said that, you know, there were some other things I heard them saying about him and Hitler and different things like that. And I'm just like, wow, you know, they're taking this very far with a society that most people don't even know what anti-Semitism means. You haven't looked it up yet. You don't understand how easy it would be to commit that, right? Based on what you say about a certain group of people. So what you might want to ask yourself is that why don't other groups of people have that same type of protection? And again, how much can we say, right? Because my question would be, well, then why is it that nobody's protecting my people from being portrayed on TV, movies, and in rap and in music the way that we're being portrayed? Why is nobody protecting our worldwide image? Why are we over-sexualizing our women out of all the cultures? Ours are the most over-sexualized, so it's kind of a poison pot of women when you're looking at it from a worldwide zoom-out lens. No disrespect to those of you out there that respect yourselves, no disrespect. But to those of you that play toward this narrative, you got to understand that you're making it worse on everyone and the entire culture. And yeah, you're getting to the bag and all this type of stuff y'all say. But at the same time, you're going to be old with an old bag, and you're going to be an old bag. And it's not going to be what you thought it was going to be cracked up to be. Where's the love? Where's your man? Where's your family? Where's your grandkids, right? You're going to have none of that, because a lot of people have been fooled by culture. So when we're talking about media and mass media, all we're talking about, especially from a melanated perspective, culturally, is stop using our culture as the modern day experimentations. Stop using our culture as the mass experimentation culture. And I'm not comparing that to anybody else's culture, okay? But what I am saying is that in the now, and I'm not talking about the past, I'm talking about right now, we are the experimentated on culture. And you can't argue with that, because our stuff gets taken by everybody that looks like us onto people that don't look like us, and is owned by the people that look the least like us, and used on a worldwide scale. We're the most scalable commodity as an actual culture, right? And you'll see people taking advantage of different cultures. You think back to the Chinese culture, the Asian culture, you think back to the martial arts, right? You think back to things like, yo, that's racist too. The way some of that stuff started to be done started to be disrespectful to their actual heritage. But we don't speak on things like that because there's lines that are comfortable being crossed. And we're not allowed to speak up about it because all of a sudden we're saying too much about the wrong people, and it becomes this larger thing that was put in place a very long time ago that we got to uphold, right? Because it's always been that way. Well, this is where you will get the black people saying, well, we're this too. We have had stuff done too, right? This is where you get the Me Too stuff, right? So you got to not fall for that as well, because it goes beyond that. This is like going to court, right? And then you start arguing something that has nothing to do with what they brought you there for, and you're wondering why they won't listen to you. We keep arguing what we don't understand. Forget understanding, we don't understand it. So again, I'm going to get into some of the education of this. I felt like it's important to show you some connections that I feel like just shouldn't be ignored. Last thing I want to say is that people were saying these bigger companies should remove his catalogs, remove his music from being able to be reached and listened to online and on these networks. I'm telling you right now, they're not going to do that, okay? They are not going to do that, okay? His stuff will always be on the internet. And then I have a question to the black community. Now, we're denouncing people and things because of what they're saying, what they believe, what their actual viewpoint position is, which we don't have the power to do, but we love doing that, right? A marginalized people, a people always complaining about being misunderstood, unrecognized, not included, all kind of stuff we complain about, but we love to inflict that same pain on the closest person to us that we can inflict that on. Tell me I'm lying. We do it all the time. We annoy people because we know what it's like to be annoyed. Nobody's hurting us more than us. That's what I can't get over. Why won't we address that? So I feel like his way of addressing that is by bringing up what he brought up. And what he's trying to say is that the biggest influences on our kids, on our people, our culture, on the world about us even, is our media portrayal. Period. It is. You can't deny that. It's our media portrayal. We keep accepting the roles. That is true. But at the same time, how come we're not allowed to look at who's offering the roles? How come we're not allowed to talk about them? The same ones that won't play the same roles that we play. So they were talking about Universal Records not taking down his music. I'm gonna let you know in a minute who that's owned by. And, to the black community, I would say, why don't we question the record labels and the companies that continue to promote the violence and the things that are killing the kids, killing the community. Like I always say, the men are off playing ball, they playing sports, they doing little kid shit, making a whole lot of money to be distracted and be distractions, while their communities are suffering. And if the men would go back to their communities, we can get these kids back in check. Because right now, daddy government ain't watching the kids. Mom seems too tied up. We looked at the numbers on mom, she ain't looking good. This is the position they've got us in. Most of her kids ending up locked up. We need to start questioning why they won't drop these rappers from these labels. The same way the banks dropped Kanye. The same way Adidas dropped Kanye. They will show you partnerships with these companies with rappers that promote the same, matter of fact, worse content than Kanye has ever produced in all of his music career. That they will have on every single record. From drug use to over-sexualization of our culture, when these same companies claim to be about inclusion and diversity. Yeah, we're diverse, we'll screw over anybody. Any culture, see? So when you're asking for diversity, in what stance though? Be specific. So why won't we drop some of these athletes that in their personal life represent things that are less than honorable, if that's what we're going by? So we know that it's about the public stance and it's about what's being said and seen in the public eye. Why? Because the public is the masses. And what the masses see and feel dictates how the masses move. I'm only shining a light on the obvious. So they can promote gang violence. We got companies that literally make gangbanger shoes and clothes. I remember when I started seeing them incorporate the bandana patterns into regular clothes back in the day. You see, because I came up in a time where gangbanging was real. I used to gangbang. So when I saw them incorporating that stuff into real clothes in the stores, I was just like, wow. They just gonna get money off the streets. They just gonna get money off the deaths. They're gonna give them a more stylish way to bang. Because not everybody can get out of that lifestyle. You gotta have somebody around you that care about you, or you will not get out of that. That is the only way I made it out of that. Somebody cared about me. There were some people that cared about me on my journey when I didn't care about me. So the stuff I talk about, believe me, I've been through, and I'm only doing this because I feel like I'm supposed to, right? Some of this stuff needs to be exposed as what it is. I'm not trying to do a conspiracy. And like I always say, I don't belong to any group. I love all cultures. I've dated different races. My daughter is mixed. This is about knowledge. This is about learning. Not being blind to what you're involved in, right? At least have knowledge of what you're involved in. So while they're making shoes and clothes that's relatable to the gangs and doing colorways on shoes that's the gang banging colorways for those cities, under the guise of, we're making them for the sports team, which also plays a role in that. Nobody wants to talk about that. So we won't separate from people that promote worse in the majority of markets, but we will separate from somebody that even admittedly openly say, Kanye said, I didn't know I was being anti-Semitic and had to go look it up. And then when I saw the definition of it, then I realized that that's what they're saying I'm being. But what I say is that outside of everybody being shocked and everybody talking about emotionally what they feel like, why don't we at least ask, what's this man's motivation behind even saying that stuff? Besides how he said it, besides all that, step aside from that for a minute. I know you love to react. I know you want to be very reactionary, right? We love popping off. That's our favorite thing to do, right? Calling out somebody when they wrong. We got to stop being so quick to do that and say sometimes why. So if we could have at least got to the why on what he was doing and saying, I think it would have been way more enlightening than the conversation that's been going on based upon the shock value of what he said. Because see, that's left up to your own personal understanding. You could be shocked all day if you're stupid. If you're real stupid, you're going to be even more shocked. Think about it. So the larger brands, which y'all might not know, are owned by the same groups that he spoke against. So all I'm saying is that this is why you won't see all of his catalogs and stuff removed. It's because there's ones that own what people are saying are the larger companies holding the stuff and still making money. So, I mean, come on, guys. Y'all got to think. So what I'm going to do real quick is run through a few things. I'm going to read a few things that's really going to give y'all some education. So you might want to get your pen and pad out. And I want to say a couple of facts. And this is not racial. Please don't even try me, right? So Jewish people during slavery, this is common knowledge. They were known to be the brokers in slave trade, right? They were the money people, okay? The bankers. You got to look deeper into what's going on and why people are so eager to protect their image because of what they have built and what has been done and said about them previously, okay? So I'm not saying to go against or go with anything. I'm just wanting you to recognize why what's happening is happening, okay? So when we're talking about the ownership of the media in America, because I want this to be factual so that nobody's saying that I'm slandering anybody or making any one culture seem like they're trying to monopolize a situation, because that would be anti-Semitic if I was to do that about the Jewish people, okay, or the Jew people. So when we talk about the largest digital influence, you'll often hear it referred to in the media as big tech, okay? So let's go over the biggest, let's say the majority owners of digital. So this would be the entire digital market, okay? So the first company we'll say is Alphabet. Now this is, if you know who Alphabet is, this is Google, okay? So Alphabet, they own Google, YouTube, Android. So all Android operating systems, right? So you say, wait, the Google phone is different. No, it's not, okay? So they own Google, YouTube, Android operating systems. They own the site Blogger, and they own the entire mail system of Gmail. Okay, so this, as I go over these names, I want you to think about the things that they cover. Okay, so we got all that covered. That's a lot, because most of you only go on Google, YouTube, on your Android phone and check your Gmail. So Alphabet got you. That's your whole day, right? And we've only covered one company, okay? So next, the next company in this is going to be Amazon. Now, Amazon is a cloud computing platform because it owns another company called AWS. All right, it also owns Amazon Prime Video, Amazon Music. It owns a gaming network called Twitch. If you didn't know that, Amazon owns Twitch, right? So this is where all the kids and people go on to share different videos. There's been positive and negative put on Twitch because it's a live streaming service, but that is owned by Amazon as well. All right, Metro Goldwyn Mayer, Orion Pictures, MGM Television, MGM HD Cable Channel, MGM Holdings, Epix, all those channels, those all owned by Amazon, okay? So that's a lot of the networking, the internet, the gaming, stuff like that. So now, Apple produces the iPhone, iPad, Mac, Apple Watch, Apple TV. The iPad has its own operating system. The Mac has its own operating system. And the watch has its own operating system, along with the TVs having their own operating system. If you're into technology, you understand what I'm saying. None of these things share the operating system. They all have their own operating system that is exclusively owned by Apple, okay? So they own Apple Music, Apple TV, and Apple News, which is a news aggregator. This is what they call a news aggregator site, where they're really influencing the media once again. But if you don't know who owns Apple and how they can trend stories and have it on everybody's phone, so you got to think about this stuff. I'm not accusing anybody. I'm just showing you how this stuff works, right? So Meta owns Facebook, Instagram, Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, and Oculus virtual reality, okay? So you got everything now going to your social networks, and then your communication networks. They tell you WhatsApp, yeah, man, it's secure. Yeah, I believe it for now, right? Because now that you see that Meta is one company that owns Facebook, Instagram, Facebook Messenger, all your messages, and WhatsApp, which is supposed to be private, but none of those other companies that they own run on a private stance. So do I believe it? For now. And they also own virtual reality network or platform of Oculus VR. So now we're going all the way into the meta already, right? Because this is meta. So we're already talking about getting into the virtual reality with the company and how they take you on into that virtual reality. Now, there's an interesting side note for Meta. If you never heard the address for where this is located, it's actually One Hacker Way. Okay, so that's the address for this company, One Hacker Way. So just think about the kind of stuff that they do in plain sight. Microsoft is the next company. Microsoft owns LinkedIn, they own MSN, they own Bing, they own Azure, Xbox, Office, Outlook, they own Skype, they own Windows. There's a lot of other things that they own. There's actually a larger list of companies that Microsoft owns. And so this would be all digital, what we just covered. So Alphabet, Amazon, Apple, Meta, and Microsoft. That covers all of our digital. So you guys, you got to think about what he was saying and what he was trying to say. How he said it is and isn't important. All right. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 companies there that own all digital. Let's go on to video. Now we got Walt Disney Company. They own ABC, the Disney Channel, Disney XD, Freeform, FX, all the FX channels, FX Movie, Disney. They also own National Geographic, Nat Geo Wild, so they're giving you your nature stuff, your nature narratives. They own History, the History Channel. So you got Disney giving you your history. They own A&E, Lifetime. So all these little serious, the women killing the men, all this kind of stuff on Lifetime, being abused and whatnot. This is Disney, right? They own Disney Mobile, Disney Publishing Worldwide, Pixar, Lucasfilm, Marvel. The list goes on. The list goes on and on. The theme parks, of course. Then we have Netflix, right? Netflix owns Roku. They have very close ties with Roku, right? So we'll say that they are affiliated. They won't say that they own them, but they're affiliated. So we got NBC Universal. Now, this is a big one. They own Telemundo, the Hispanic channels. They own Universal Pictures, Illumination, right? Illuminate. DreamWorks Animation. They own Bravo, CSNBC, MSNBC. They own the Sci-Fi Network. So it's funny that the same networks that'll give you the religious stations on Sunday, give you everything like that, will still give you the sci-fi and give you a lot of the other stuff that is not consistent with other things that they support, because truth be told, they support everything. And it's only us down here choosing different things to say that we back or we don't back or we cancel. And that's only for them to know what to market to us next, right? So this is all a game that we got to stop playing. It's annoying. When you zoom out and see this stuff, it's very annoying. There's so much that I really don't want to read all this, but I'm going to. Because some of this you really need to know who owns what. So Warner Brothers Discovery is the next big one in digital. I'm sorry, in video. We just did digital, this is video. So we're like the 4th company down in video. They own, this is Warner Brothers Discovery, all right? They own the CW, Now this is gonna be funny because Warner Brothers to me seems to own a lot of black stuff. You know, where they put us. As far as like stations like the CW and the WB and all that kind of stuff. You know, it's kind of embarrassing how they do us like that. Put us on the lower looking channels. The quality don't look as good as the other channels. The programming seems second rate. The writers seem kind of doofy. So I don't know how that works and why it would still be allowed to be on TV when you own other channels like HBO, Cinemax, but you exercise a lower quality of execution when it comes to certain people. So I don't understand how that works, right? But I'm just pointing out that these people own all the same networks. So they own, Warner Brothers owns the CW, CBS, HBO, CNN, Cinemax, Cartoon Network, Adult Swim, HLN, NBA TV, TBS, TNT, True TV, Turner Classic Movies, TLC, Animal Planet, Discovery Channel, HGTV, the Food Network, Magnolia Network, the Cooking Channel, the Travel Channel, ID, the Oprah Winfrey Network, Science, right? So they're gonna give you religion, movies, animals, the planet, food, travel, science. They're gonna give you everything. This is all I'm saying. New Line Cinema, Warner Brothers Pictures, Castle Rock, Warner Brothers Television, Warner Brothers Interactive Entertainment, DC Entertainment, Motor Trend, Turner Sports, Bleacher Report. I mean, there's so many networks, and TVN Group in Europe and Eurosport. So Warner Brothers owns all this, even outside of the United States. One company, right? Paramount. They own CBS, CW, CBS Sports, Showtime, Pop, CBS Studios, MTV, Nickelodeon, Nick at Night, TV Land, VH1, BET. Who owns BET? Paramount Global. Okay? The same people that own all these other channels that I'm telling you right now. Logo TV, Paramount TV, Paramount Pictures, Paramount Home Entertainment, and let's see, National Amusement. So who owns all these companies? Paramount, CW, which is also involved in Warner Brothers. So everything I just previously said, it says here, the Redstone family. Sumner Murray Redstone. He's a billionaire. I'm not going to speak on him. I'm not going to speak on his life at all. But the Redstone family, through a company called National Amusements, owns Paramount Global. So you've probably never heard of National Amusements, right? This is how it works. So National Amusements is an American privately owned movie theater operator and mass media holdings company. So something that you've never heard of will own all the things that you've heard of. I want you to see how this works. So Fox Corporation, they own Fox, My Network TV, Fox News Channel, Fox Business, Weather, Fox News Radio, News Talk, News Nation, Sports, FS1, FS2, Big Ten Sports, Fox Television, Bento Box. So you're talking about, well, how can they own sports? You gotta think, y'all. Think. Are these channels or are these corporations? You're looking at them as a channel that shows sports, when you're not realizing that this is a corporation that owns the sports that they're showing on their channel. Especially when these are the only channels that you see those sports. Big Ten Network, right? Sony Pictures, they own TriStar, Lionsgate, AMC. AMC owns, this is the last one I'm going to do in this area, and this is actually the last one. AMC at Network owns AMC, IFC, Sundance TV, WeTV. They own 49.9% of BBC America, IFC Films, AMC, a network called All Black, right? Now, this is owned by the same person that came out with BET back in the day. He now owns a network called All Black. Now, all these networks I just said, including BritBox, are all owned by a person named James Dolan. He has control over All Black, AMC, and everything else I just named. And you say, well, wait a minute. A black person owns All Black. Yeah, but who owns him? This is what y'all can't understand is going on. This is very unfortunate. Now, you say, well, who's James Dolan that owns All Black and all this other stuff, AMC? Well, you'd be surprised to know he owns Madison Square Garden and all the sports that goes on there. He oversees everything that has to do with that. So the sports guy, yeah, he owns Black, All Black, which is owned by the guy that used to own BET. Right? So it's just funny when you see all these connections that are in plain sight that we had no knowledge of who owned what, but what you gotta really know is that from record labels to video games, all these things are owned only by a few companies. So this is mainly what he was saying, is that things aren't made fair from the top. He was not saying this group. I don't feel like it was really about that. And I feel like it proves his point the way everybody's reacting from the top. Because people are told to react. Y'all gotta understand who owns the companies that's doing what they're doing. Now do y'all get it? That was my point. They own the companies that's cutting dude. So don't let them virtue signal you, trigger you, by thinking that they're virtuous about what you care about. Don't let them get away with that. It's not a coincidence that, there's only 3 companies that own all the music. Universal, Sony, and Warner Music. So when you're talking about taking him off, I'm telling you right now, they're not gonna do that. It's only 3 companies. Who owns Universal Music, right? One of the companies that own Universal Music is a company I've invested in many times on the actual market. That is a company named Tencent. Right? It's a Chinese company, Tencent, Tencent Holdings, right? Multinational technology and entertainment conglomerate. Okay? Now, Tencent, along with Vivendi, I'm sure another name you've never heard of because this is a French company located in Paris. Well, these 2 companies own Universal Music. So Universal Music is owned by China and Paris. Now, when you look it up, it's going to say that they own minority stake, and they're going to say that the company is majority owned by the public. Now, watch how tricky this is. I'm going to show you something real quick. Now, who is the public? The public is a lot of regular people that own shares. Now, against the public, which is a lot of people that don't know each other, you have these 2 groups, Tencent and Vivendi, that they're saying are the owners of the rest of it. So they call it the minority stake, but we can say the rest of it. So if we can narrow down the rest of it to these 2 groups, right? But the majority that's out there is so spread amongst everyone that does not know each other. Who really owns the most of Universal Music? Is it the people or is it these 2 companies? So you got to understand that when they're using words like minority stake, this too is another form of trickery. This is a very deep game being played. So you got them, you got Sony, you got Warner. That's it. And when you don't know who owns these companies, look, man, these guys are worth, I'm just going to say Warner Music is owned by a guy named Len Blavatnik, Sir Leonard. I don't want to pronounce his name wrong. He's a British American business magnate, right? Philanthropist, Ukrainian, Jewish origin. I'm not going to say too much, but we must help Ukraine, right? So all I'm saying is that there are relationships and things that we don't understand while we out here trying to condemn what somebody's saying when we don't really know why he's saying it. Because it is true that moves are being made at the top based on people's actual religious belief and who their God is versus what needs to happen for whoever it needs to happen for. To me, that's a very dangerous game to play, because I can't keep up with what you're willing to do for your God. I don't know how far you're willing to go. You get what I'm saying? I don't know what you believe is the right or wrong thing to do, because I'm not you. So this is a tough scenario, but this is what we're doing nowadays. We can't speak the truth if it can be put into the lens of something that we can't talk about, such as religious belief maybe, or certain cultures that are protected because of the past. And I feel like, damn, why aren't black people protected that way, if that's the case? Why aren't melanated people protected at all costs? They'll never do that for us now, realistically, because we kill ourselves the most. So even if we could have got to that point, right now it's not looking good because of the statistics. So it's the same with video games. You only got 3 companies: Activision, Electronic Arts, and Take-Two Interactive. So what I'm telling you, with radio it's the same, with television it's the same. There's a knowledge behind, the FCC. There's a Communications Act of 1934. These are all things you got to look into that actually let you know why things are the way they are, because they knew that there can be an issue with ownership. There's actually a cross ownership rule of 1975 that deals with that exact thing, because the community being serviced and the people that own stuff, they were seeing this stuff as a problem, but it was mainly in, let's say, in the newspaper field. So now we're all into the digital now, so it's different. In the newspaper days, they could argue that, like, hey, this is our area. You need to be talking about stuff going on over here with our newspaper. So you can see how that works in that way. But with this digital, you got everybody talking about everything. So, like I said before, I want to bring up this very key thing where they had compared Kanye to Hitler. And I just want to share some metaphysical knowledge and a little bit of my knowledge on Hebrew. And when I went through studies beyond religion, what you find is Hebrew is, like I said before, is her web, which is reference to the Zodakaya, or the Great Mother, or the Great Zodiac, right? So when you're talking about Hebrew, you're talking about the 12 sons of Jacob. You're talking about the 12 tribes. You're talking about the 12 Zodiac. You're talking about the 12 energies and the 4 elements, or the 4 seasons. You see, what people don't realize is that once you can zoom out from anything human that you're arguing about, this stuff exists above you. So I like to go straight to the place where it's in its highest form, me, myself. So I'm going to give you some initiate knowledge. I'm going to read some initiate knowledge that might shed a little bit of light on why Kanye might have said what he had said before about the Nazis or Hitler, and why some people are mixing that into the conversation. And a lot of y'all might be hearing Nazi and Hitler kind of sprinkled in, but not really knowing where it fits, right? So Nakash is a Hebrew word, and it means serpent, okay? So, when we talking about the serpent, we talking about Kundalini, right? You guys already know that. So Nakash is a Hebrew word that means serpent. In Arabic is Naya. Naya or Nayya, or Nakash. In fact, the Arabic word for serpent people is Nas. So this is like the rapper Nas, but it has 2 A's. But you're gonna see that he's using the same knowledge because everybody does this, right? So Nas is also the same thing as Gnosis with a G, right? Gnosis, right? So we know what Gnosis is. That is knowing without knowing how you know, right? This is an energy. And this is the real of what they call the mud people, right? So they were saying that this was the knowledge of the people made from mud, black mud, melanin, the Nasut, right? So we know with the word suit on the end. So we got Nas on the front where they just gave you that. which meant the serpent people, which meant gnosis, right? A knowledge people. But then you have soot on the back, which you know that this means black or melanin. This is where you get the term soot from. So even in English, it is snake, S-N-A-K-E with a capital N. So this is where we would get the term snake, neke, nakahi mori, or also comes from serpents, right? Nakahi mori also comes from serpents. According to the Metu Neter, so a lot of you know what the Meta Neter is, by Ra'un Nefer Aman, the hieroglyphic symbols for this part of the spirit is the serpent, Apep, Nak, where whence Nakash, the serpent. So this is, we know that's in reference to, we know that the serpent is in reference to the Kundalini energy, right? This is the serpent that they say spoke to the woman in the Garden of Eden. This part of the spirit is composed of subtle electromagnetic energies that have the function of animating man's life, especially the physical body. Hence the name animal spirit, right? So this is where animate comes from, or anima, or animus. And it was called in the Latin spiritual tradition, animal. Our modern use of the term animal to denote the creatures that are thus identified is an example of muddling thinking. So they're telling you that a bunch of ideologies that had come together that we just now say animals to talk about the group of the animals that we still got to go in and depict and say, well, that's a tiger or that's a bird. But it was just the knowledge of using the word animal was an example of muddling thinking, right? Laying a bunch of things together and saying, well, that's what it is, even though we kind of don't know what that is. So all things in this world are infused with this animating spirit, which they call the Kundalini Prana, the Nazarene, or the Nasarene. The Nasarene, or Nas, once again, is a Hebrew or her web or het heru word, which means aider, which means help or friend, according to Webster's dictionary. So what we're telling you is that Hebrew or her web, see, when you get caught up in the ideology, religious aspects of these words, that's where you're messing up. Because in history, in different parts of history, people were identified as certain words, but that doesn't make you can't go back and take that word out of a moment and freeze it in time and make it what everything is about. And that's what we seem to be doing without going through etymology and going back in time and at least seeing where a lot of this stuff came from. So according to Webster's dictionary, this means a native or a resident of Nazareth. So anyone that was called a Nas, a Nazarene, or a Nas, or a Nasarene was known as to be a native or a resident of Nazareth. Now this is where it's going to get very interesting for Christians, right? So Christian from the Hebrew het heru, as in the golden calf heb heru, word Nazarene or Nasir or Nasar or Ansar or Nas, the Greek word gnosis or gnosis, right, with a capital N, with a G and then a capital N, which means knowledge or recognition. Well, like I said before, gnosis is knowing without knowing how you know. It is a certain level of knowledge or recognition that you come with. It also means intuitive, and the Greek word for asin. And remember, this is nas, nasir, gnosis, right? Knowledge, recognition, intuitive. Asin, which is the word that derives the word essence, right? Which means the individual, real, or ultimate nature. We know nature is netter, so the ultimate netter, the essence, right? So remember, black people, we had a magazine called Essence Magazine. So now you can kind of understand what Essence Magazine was trying to show you by always having black people on it. By saying that you were the thing, the entity, the essence. You are the something that exists of nature, the netter, right? The essence, the entity. A member of the monastic brotherhood of what they call the real Jews, the Hebrews, her web, the het herus. In Palestine from the 2nd century BC to the 2nd century AD, both words were derived from the her web or Hebrew word Nasir, which again just meant Nasar or Ansar or Nas or Gnosis. And when it became Greek, it went into Gnosis from Hebrew to Greek. So you got to understand how etymology walks things into a different energy. And a lot of times you're not able to recognize what it came from. So let's keep going, because remember, Kanye said that black people were the real Hebrews, but everybody is the Hebrew is what I'm trying to show you. He said that blacks were the real Israelites. Well, everybody is the Israelites is what I'm trying to show you. So this is a knowledge that goes above a lot of people's heads. So I'm also going to show you where they tie in the Nazis and stuff like that, because remember what we're talking about right here, right? We're talking about Nazareth. We're talking about the Bible and being a Nazarene. So you got to be able to read the Bible and decode what they're telling you. What are they telling you when they talk about Nazareth now? What are you going to understand when you see the word Nazarene, Nas, and you understand that that's Gnostic, Gnosis, that that's knowledge, that that's intuition that they're talking about. So a lot of these things are just energetic things that you have to have knowledge to actually be able to perceive in the right way. So when you're talking about these words that derived from Hebrew, right, as Nazir and Nazareth, a town in Palestine, which did not exist till after the so-called death of who they call the Jesus Christ. So this place didn't exist until Jesus died. But in the Bible, they're going to give it to you kind of out of order because it's not historical. It's more of an energy play. So Nazarite or Nazarite, however you want to say it, according to Webster's dictionary, means a real Jew, Hebrew, or Het Heru, the house of Heru, which means light, of biblical times, consecrated to God by a vow, especially to avoid drinking wine, cutting the hair, and being defiled by a corpse. So remember what I said, being defiled by a corpse, because there's some that talk about the word necker, which is where nigger and all these other words kind of derived from, but was also related to necro, right? Which is a word that refers to death or the dead. So there's deeper knowledge to this stuff that when we're talking about the dead, we're not talking about a dead body. We might be talking about a dead energy so that another energy can be born. So again, a lot of these things seem dark until you understand what you're dealing with. A lot of this terminology has to be taken in context of the time period it was used and, you know, the knowledge of what they were actually talking about. But you got to have knowledge to even go into these things, or you will be thoroughly confused. So I chose to read this and just lightweight explain it along the way and show you something real quick, okay, of how things can be misunderstood very easily. So again, I'll start. Nazarite or Nazareth, according to Webster's dictionary, means a real, in parentheses, real Jew, Hebrew, or Het Heru, the house of Heru, or the house of light, of biblical times, consecrated to God by a vow, especially to avoid drinking wine, cutting the hair, and being defiled by a corpse. The German word Nazi, N-A-Z-I, because remember, Nazarite, come on guys. The German word Nazi, the German fascist party controlled under Hitler in 1933 to 1945, is also derived from the Hebrew word Nazir or Nazarite. In addition, the Holy Bible speaks of Mount Nasir. The Holy Bible even states that Jesus was a Nazarene from Nazareth, even though Nazareth was not a town until years later after the so-called crucifixion. Hence the origin of the Holy Bible New Testament Matthew 10:16 verse, "Be ye therefore wise as serpents, yet gentle as doves." In China, the Naga is given the form of the dragon, also called the dragon spirit. So in China, the Naga is given the form of the dragon, not the snake. Remember, the Nas, the Naga, the Kundalini, the Gnosis. Remember what this represented. It represents the subtle electric energy of the body, the animating energy. But this is also in no form the representation of knowledge, intuition. So again, Matthew 10:6, "Be ye therefore wise as serpents, yet gentle as doves." In China, the Naga is given in the form of a dragon, also called the dragon spirit, and has a direct association with the Emperor King, and is known as the Son of Heaven. In Tibet, it is still known in a symbolic sense, and they are called Lu. So what I'm getting at is that there's a lot that people don't understand about this knowledge and where it came from. And you see how easily Nasir and then the Nazi and the Nazi and the Nazi, you don't understand what people were talking about. So I wouldn't be so quick to make a comment until you've done a more in-depth study. So this is the last part I'm going to read. The word Naga is rooted in Sanskrit and it means serpent. In the East, and we see what also means serpent. Don't forget, Nas, Nasir, knowledge. In the East Indian pantheon, it is connected with the serpent spirit and the dragon spirit. So they don't use the snake, they use the dragon. It is the equivalency to the Burmese Nats or god serpents. In the esoteric tradition, it is synonymous for adepts or initiates. So initiates understand that the dragon, the snake, and all these energies are synonymous. The initiates understand, and the adepts, that these things are the same thing in different forms depending on where you came across them, okay? In India and in Egypt, and even in Central and South America, the Naga stands for one who is wise. And so even removing the vowels, remember, this is just NGR, which is pronounced Netker. See? So this is a knowledge that a lot of people won't understand. Remove the vowels. Vowels mean nothing. They're interchangeable to the real knowledge. You got to go back in etymology to even learn these things so that you can navigate this information. So the word Netyer, NGR, Netger, Net, then dash GER, and then the word Netger, NET-YER, see how it evolves from that, or Netger, NETGER, from which the English terms nature and nurture come from. See how Netger is nurture and nature? So we got to understand these words and why they would take certain words and then turn them into something with a negative connotation. There's a power in that because the word was already powerful. So to flip that switch to the dark side, just understand the purpose of that. The idea of God being nature and nature being God comes from the African and Kamada ideas of what God is, which shows down to the similarities in the terms used to describe aspects of the Godhead. So what they're saying is that there was just an understanding that what we reference as God is the all. It's everything that even involves us and everything that we are. So what I really wanted to show you with this episode is that just be careful whose side you take when people are speaking their truth and giving their opinion, because you might not understand everything they're saying from their stance. You might not know how everything is connected and that things are controlled. And if a person becomes ultimately frustrated with that, then they could let that out in a way that's not really conducive with doing further business. And guess what? They probably wouldn't care about it at that point. And if you want my actual opinion, him being dropped from all these brands is what I've been waiting on to see. A lot of the black or African American, whatever you want to call it, melanated, what I've been waiting to see these men do. Put down these contracts, tear up these contracts, pay the fee, exit the contract. Go back to your community and build something. So my hat's off to Kanye as far as saying and coming to the realization that him being cut from all those was the happiest day of his life. A lot of people not going to understand that. And they're going to think he just saying that to save face when they don't really understand that making money with a bunch of brands ain't what you think it is when you understand ownership and being used. Contracts and obligations. It's not a game. So I just wanted to drop my 3 cents on that situation. And I hope you really got something from it. I hope I came through to you a little bit clear on just, the ownership levels, who you might not know owns what. And it's good to look into that stuff, man, before you give your opinion on what somebody else going through. So with that being said, repeat listeners, I appreciate you. Contributors, everybody that rocks with the channel, comes to the channel, tells and shares the channel. I appreciate y'all, man. And I'm always going to pop on here. I'm very busy in my personal life, my venture. But look, this is still important to me. And I just get on here to speak my truth. And I appreciate y'all listening. So until next time, this has been another episode of My 3 Cents. Wholeness and all kinds of gratitude, y'all. Gone.